welcome to another edition of What Do You Believe? I'm Devin Croner, your host, and I am excited to continue talking with you and with people about various subjects and topics so that we can gain perspective, so that we can gain insight into things that maybe we don't understand as well as we should. Let me bring in my guest here today. Where did she go? There she is. She disappeared on me. And I am very excited to have someone with me today that I know. Hello, Kelly.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Awesome. But again, as we get started today, I want you to introduce yourself first of all, and then we'll kind of go from there. All right.
Well, I am Kelly Foster. And what else would you like me to say about myself? How would you want me to introduce myself?
Well, what do you do? Where are you from? What's kind of current in your life, I suppose?
Okay. Well, I am from Mahomet. I don't like to claim that so much. I claim more that I'm from Champaign County. And right now, I am the program coordinator of the Illinois Quantum Information Science and Technology Center with the University of Illinois. It's very fascinating, breaking edge. I don't really understand a lot of it, but it's still exciting.
Very cool. And again, you and I grew up together. We actually went to school together in Mahomet, the great metropolitan capital that it is. And
Really?
that kind of brings us to what we're going to kind of discuss a little bit today. And I want you to share your experience because again, it's so interesting that people can be in the same environments and have completely different experiences and perspectives, and a lot of times never realize what someone else's perspective is. And that's kind of what I want to get across, not just in this discussion with you, but kind of through this series, that it's okay to see the world through other people's eyes.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to be scared about things that we maybe don't understand. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have discussions. It's okay to challenge yourself to think differently, right? And in Mahomet, which again, I appreciate the town that I grew up in. I feel like I got a good education in a lot of ways, but there's kind of an inclusiveness to it, right? Give me your perspective on that. And again, we know each other. We grew up together in school, so we'll kind of go back and forth on this and kind of delve into this a little bit.
Yeah, so I do absolutely agree with what you said. Muhammad does have an extraordinary education. I don't think that I could have gone as far as I have without having that.
Mhm.
But it still lacked a lot of other points that I think are really important for anybody's personal development, especially as a child.
Mhm.
You know, I know that you and I are both aware Muhammad is very white. There's not a lot of diversity, especially amongst the LGBT community. And even within Muhammad, it was like the turf wars, so to speak, was more about who had money and who didn't. It was
Right.
more like Muhammad versus Candlewood, which is a trailer park that's
Mhm.
kind of like on the outskirts of town. And I know a lot of people that live there experience their own prejudices.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's kind of the where our discussion is going to go in this time is the dealing with prejudice and understanding kind of what that's like and how people can uh, fight against it, I guess, or make themselves aware of again other people's situations and perspectives. And to back up just a little bit, you may not remember this, but I remember a time, I believe we were either in elementary school or junior high, where something had happened. I don't remember what, it doesn't really matter what, but something had happened in your life and you were having a really hard day. And I remember kind of walking back home with you.
And you sat on my porch with me and had a
Yeah.
conversation.
And just talk and I never really knew what the issue was. It didn't really matter what the issue was. It just was very apparent to me in that moment that, you were somebody I knew. I considered you a friend. Not that, we were great close friends, but
Yeah.
and you were having a hard time. Uh, and as I look back in that experience now, I wonder, was there something that was a lot deeper, knowing you, and we're going to get into all of that, but knowing you, that was happening in that moment. Maybe it was not, but again, the perspective of it, and the things that we get so enclosed in our own bubble a lot of times, and especially right now with what's going on in our society, in our country, with racial tensions and people becoming aware of all of that, and it's trickling over from Black lives into, as you mentioned, the LGBTQ community and all these other areas where we're starting to realize people have become so separated, so isolated in their own little groups. And it's time that we realize what's going on with one another, because
Yeah.
you bleed red the same as I do, right? You have feelings the same as I do. You have
Right.
dreams and goals the same as I do, but that doesn't mean our experiences and our perspectives are the same. But we can appreciate that about one another, right?
Right.
So now, go back and give us a little bit of background on you, your life, your story, so we understand kind of where our discussion is going.
So, I have constantly, like every single time that I talk to you, which has always been just spurts randomly throughout these many previous years, but I will never forget the day that you had walked home with me and you sat down on my porch on the front of my house. Like, you sat on the right side of me. I can distinctly remember like looking over and talking to you and just appreciating how much it meant to me that you listened to me. I have no idea what the conversation was. I really don't. But even with me growing up, like it's hard to really recall what was going on. I know that I don't have the most struggles of anybody in the world, but I know that when I was growing up, my father, he died of a massive heart attack when I was 15. And it was really hard for me to deal with that in school, because he had died, actually. And I don't know if you remember this or not. He died on May 31st, 1999. And it was the day before our finals. And I tried to explain to a lot of our teachers that it was really difficult for me to do anything. And the teachers had kind of told me, like, this is really hard. We get it. Take your finals, do the best that you can. And by our senior year, I almost became enraged because I think we had 3 or 4 students who had died in school,
Mm-hmm.
and finals were canceled for everybody. And it made me so mad that it was like, I understand that this is a community impact, but to look at a couple of these deaths, and I'm not saying that their deaths were more or less important than anybody else's, but to not even consider somebody who had lost somebody who was so close to her and just kind of glaze over it, kind of hit home on a lot of the other experiences that I had with school.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I'm sure like other people aren't aware that I came out in high school. I think it was senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a stressful day for me. It was in the morning. Another person that you and I had gone to school with, he had told me a week before he didn't know if he was gay. And every single morning throughout my entire high school career, every single morning I would get up and I would sit with my mom while she put on her makeup and got ready for work, and we would have our daily conversations. And so one of the things I brought up was one of our classmates had thought that he might be gay. And within a week, he decided to tell his parents, and I was concerned just because of the community that we were in, that he would face a lot of hardships. And at that point, my mother had told me, I don't even know what I would do if one of my own children was gay. And I kind of froze and I said, well, I'm gay. And she froze, and I walked to go to school. And she stopped me at the door, and the one thing that she really wanted to know was if she was going to have grandchildren. like I'm 17. I don't know. Like, I can't make that decision. I don't know. And so I went to school, and there wasn't a lot of closure for me. And it was a really big pivotal moment in my life. And I went to school, and I remember Mrs. Goff was one of the first people who had approached me, and she knew that I was struggling. And she asked me what happened. And so I told her, and the first words out of her mouth was, "Go call your mother right now and tell her you love her." And so, like, that was great. I did. And I didn't let her talk. I just called her and told her I loved her, and I hung up. But throughout the rest of the day, it was really hard for me because there was another student. He had a lot of severe disabilities. Nobody would sit with him at lunch. I always made it my point to always sit with him and talk with him and ask him about his day. But the woman who, she was kind of like his care person. I don't really know what to call it. She knew that I was struggling too, and she wanted to know what was wrong. And I told her that I had told my mother I was gay, and she sat in silence. And the next day, she ended up telling me that I was no longer allowed to have lunch with him or sit near him or be near him until I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and that my choice was wrong, and to never approach him ever again. And it became really hard because there were very few hit and misses that I had experienced. Where you and I grew up is a very, very small town. Everybody knows everybody. They know each other's cousins. They know everything that's going on. And there were a few handful of people that I will remember for their kindness, such as yourself. And it does, like, it still speaks volumes 20 years later to me.
Hey, now you're making me feel old.
I'm sorry, but that's the time. But I also sit and I think about a lot of the hard times that I had. I had a couple of other people who were, quote unquote, in the closet. People didn't know that they were lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, anything.
Right.
And now I was out. And one of these people in particular, his parents were a part of the school board. And so he would tell me they would have school board meetings about me and how to handle, like, how do we deal with a lesbian in the school? And it turned into, I was heavily involved in theater. I was the president of our theater club. I was voted into it. I was actively involved. I tried to do everything I could with them. But I was also told not to sit near anybody. I had to go to rehearsal and sit by myself because my choice made other people uncomfortable. And that was really hard for me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So talk a little bit about the realization that you come into in realizing that you're gay. I mean, is that, again, not having had that experience, okay, I've never dealt with those feelings and those thoughts and those questions, and that also in a community environment of how people are going to respond, because again, it was a much different mentality about people being gay in the early 2000s, the late 90s. I mean, there was a lot happening in society, but especially in a town like ours, that was very novel, but not in a good way.
Right. So
not something that anybody wanted their children to aspire to, things like that. But again, that's not really kind of how it works. Like, you didn't just wake up one morning, throw a dart at a board and be like, I'm going to go for this today.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So I would say that you and I probably actually had a similar experience in that, when you're growing up, you might have a teen beat or whatever the male equivalent was. I actually recall the exact location where I realized it. I spent a weekend with my father, and my friends that I was hanging out with, I was 10 years old. We had gone through all the teen beat. We pulled out all the Jonathan Taylor Thomas, all the hot guys of the day. And I sat there and I'm like, but why? They're fine. But I recall watching Saved by the Bell, and I was like, Kelly Kapowski is I want to be her friend. Like, I want to hang out with her. Like, I want to know everything about her. Like, who is she? Like, who's this actress? And I ended up realizing that what my friends had felt about Jonathan Taylor Thomas is kind of how I felt about some of these other people. Like, I wasn't sexually activated or anything, but it was more of, you know, I find this person very attractive and I want to know who they are as a person. And I had like my own little crushes. And so it became really hard for me because I was at a stoplight when my father was taking me home when I realized it. And it wasn't so much of a light bulb as it was a sense of dread, because my family was extremely religious. And so to me, my immediate thought, and I don't know if you remember this at all, but I distinctly remember us having a sex education about homosexuals and how the HIV virus was strictly for homosexuals. So I immediately went to,
wasn't it?
yeah, I immediately went to, I was going to burn in hell as a 10-year-old. I was going to die a slow, painful death. And I distinctly remember that Christmas asking all of my family, like, I wanted Bible material. I wanted to know the 10 Commandments. I wanted to go to church with everybody. Like, I needed to know how to fix what my problem was.
And talk about the pressure and the anxiety and the emotional side of that, you know, balancing, okay, here's how I'm feeling, and here's what I'm experiencing, and here's what I feel like I'm supposed to be feeling and experiencing. Those things aren't meshing. What does that do to you mentally, emotionally, in terms of relationships with peers, family, whatever?
Oh, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Like, I remember, you know, like being an adult now and talking to people who are even within a medical field, they kind of hear my story and they're like, what was going on? Because when I was 10 years old, I was immediately diagnosed with depression. I was put on antidepressant medication. A lot of it didn't work for me. I was suicidal for a lot of years and was constantly struggling. And it was really hard for me because I have always kind of been one of those people that if I know I have a problem, I want to try to understand it and figure it out for myself before I seek help from others, especially on a topic where I knew that I was quote unquote wrong. And I didn't want to bring that attention to myself.
Right. Talk about that aspect of it, because what you just said, I think, is something that it is so important, and something that if you've never been there, like I can't fathom that feeling, because I've never been in a place where I've looked at, like, this is me and me is wrong and unacceptable.
Yeah.
I haven't felt that. So, like, what do you do just to try and function going forward?
I became very quiet and kind of introverted in a way that still carries on to today. Anybody that knows me today knows that I know a lot of people, but not a lot of people know who I am. I will ask a lot of questions of others and like try to get to know who they are. But even, you know, moving forward in life, you know, with a lot of the situations that I was talking about, I was a young kid. And I know that I had kind of talked to you a little bit just off on the side about Matthew Shepard, but I remember in 1998, we were watching Channel 1 in our high school when the story had come across. And high school in general is already a really difficult time. But I remember when that story came across, there were a lot of people who had kind of whispered in the hallways that, you know, like, he deserved it, or, you know, he's bringing this stuff on himself. And it was really hard for me to even accept who I was. Sorry, I have a dog who's very needy right now. There's fireworks. It was really hard for me to just kind of like accept who I was as a person. And I think it ultimately carried over many years later, because the moment I even graduated from our high school, I kind of went to the opposite spectrum. I was trying to figure out, you know, how do I even express myself?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew in general, I always wanted to be a leader and I wanted to encourage others. So I became an RA. But I was also that weird, crazy RA that had pink, purple hair, tons of piercings, tattoos, and I try to be as supportive of others as possible. And honestly, like it still carries over into today. Like I don't know who I am. Um, but I would say the one thing that I did learn is that I don't think that my sexuality really defines who I am. It's a part of me, but I have so many other aspects of who I am that I would say, you know, if somebody were to meet me, it wouldn't be like Kelly, who's a lesbian. It would be Kelly, who I was actually recently told I'm an aggressive peer pressurer in that I want other people to succeed. I want to figure out who they are, what their dreams and aspirations are, how can I help them. One of the other things that I always try to do, like I said, I do come from a religious family. My mom's very involved with her church. And so we do a lot of, you know, feeding the homeless and going out into the community. And so I never bring up my sexuality. People, I don't hide it either. You know, if somebody asks, who are you dating? I will say.
Mm-hmm.
But I just try to present myself in a way that's my sexuality is not the first thing that people should think about. It's that I want to help my community. I want to build up those that are around me. I want to know who you are as a person. I will give you everything, the shirt off my back if I possibly can. And that's who I want to be known as.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the religious aspect. You mentioned your family being very religious a couple of times here. What was that like growing up? What is that like now? Like outside of the family aspect, does that continue to play a role in your life, or did you kind of come to a place that I know several people who have come out who grew up in church kind of came to a place they said, I just have to separate myself from that. I can't do it anymore. Uh,
Yeah.
and not because they didn't have faith, but because church is about community, and if you can't be part of the community, what's the point
Yeah.
to a lot of people? So what talk about that aspect of it.
So I would say like the biggest difference from when I was a child to now is I think religion was more important than I really thought it was. You know, I thought that people looked at the Bible and looked at Leviticus and really went by word for word of what it said. And I ended up being really lucky in that my family, as I grew older, they more or less came from an aspect of God loves everyone. And Jesus never said anything about homosexuals. And really, as long as you love others as you love your neighbor and are trying to help out and be a good person, Jesus died for your sins. Jesus saw everything that mankind did and still chose to die for you. You're good. Just don't, you know, try to take advantage of that. And so that became a really safe place for me with my family. But then my mother ended up becoming involved with a couple of religious retreats where it was a non-denominational kind of thing, which I think is great. But these weekend retreats were all-encompassing of many denominations of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the topics was you don't talk about homosexuality. You don't talk about politics. These are certain no-fly zones. And then that kind of became hard for me as well, just because, like, I'm not trying to be rude, but I feel like most people who look at me can immediately assume I'm probably gay. And so it's hard for me to walk into an enclosed space for a weekend with a group of people who I don't know where you stand on a religious spectrum. You might immediately hate me. You might immediately write me off.
Mm-hmm.
But I can just only hope that I have a message of love and care and perspective that I can give to other people. And it's up to them if they choose to listen or not.
The listening aspect, I think, again, is so important and something that we really we lose sight of. There's a lot of talking right now, in a lot of arenas, but not always a lot of listening. Going back, did you find that there were, as you started to kind of open up about, who you were there people that wanted to listen? Or like, when did you get to a place in your life, or did you really get to a place in your life where you felt like you could have open, honest conversations with people around you about who you are, what you believe, what you're passionate about, whatever that is? Or do you think there's still an element that, like, I have to hide this away, or if somebody brings it up, I can talk about it, but I can't truly be me? Like, what is that part
That's a loaded question. It's been really hard. I think it really depends on who I'm talking to.
like?
There's not a lot of people that really want to listen.
Mm,
Um, I've had people invite me to church, and I appreciate the sentiment of trying to invite me into a community.
mhm,
But unfortunately, a lot of those situations, it has ended up with, I don't think that they're wanting to listen, they're wanting to solve the problem. But I don't think it's a problem. And it's not so much that people are wanting to hear my story or figure out who I am as a person, so much as they immediately view my lifestyle as a sin, and they're just trying to like get me into the door. And so I know right now it's really difficult, and I try to be very supportive of my mother. Like, I have my own personal religious views and relationship with Jesus, but I don't go into church just because it's so difficult for me to handle a lot of the people that try to approach me or like see me as something that they can fix, or like it's like what you're saying. They don't really want to listen. They want to come at you with a solution without understanding what a problem is. And to me, it's not really a problem so much as like the problem is finding a community. And so it's difficult trying to be an adult and having that kind of situation. I ended up having a very close friend of mine who was highly involved with her church. She's a very lovely person, and I think the utmost respect for her. But it hurt when she tried to pull me into her church because she told me that I was wrong and I was living in sin and that I was going to burn in hell. Like, this is somebody who I stood by her side while she went through cancer. I was the person that helped shave her head. I was the person that took care of her children while she was too sick to. And it's hard to sit there and want to be as compassionate as possible and still at the end of the day have somebody that you love and care so much about tell
mhm,
you that you are wrong.
mhm. Do you get angry about that, or does it make you sad, or do you just kind of reach a place where there's an indifference about it, or is there a combination of feelings? I mean, how does that, when you go through this kind of cycle with people, how do you cope with it, I guess?
I used to be angry. Um, and now I try to be more understanding of the other person.
Mm,
And I think that they do come from a place of good intentions,
mhm,
but it's still hard and it hurts when you know that they are not open. They're not open to understanding, or they're so solidified in their own thoughts of what is right or wrong, black and white, like there's no gray area, that it's just a little bit painful. And so I try to show whatever compassion I can to help others.
mhm,
But there is no anger. It's just kind of sad, and I give what I can until I realize in my own level what is too much.
mhm,
Where's my breaking point?
mhm.
And I will distance myself, but still give whatever I can.
Does that, and even that side of it, though, that has to be a place of frustration where, okay, other people want you to come in and they want you to understand, here's what's wrong, here's what you need to do, here's how to fix it. uh but what you're describing is very one-sided.
Yes.
Why?
I think it's because people don't really understand. They're not taking the time, and that's where I try to come in. Is I don't want to be combative. I don't want to argue with people. I just want to show I'm another person who wants to help other people. I will do anything I possibly can for you, and it doesn't matter if I'm gay. It really does not matter. That is the last thing on anybody's mind. Like, who cares? I've dealt with it. Like, I guarantee I've had my own personal battles with myself that have torn me down worse than what anybody else could do. And if they're struggling and trying to cope with the fact that somebody in their life that they may or may not care about is gay, like, that's their battle. And I try to be as compassionate about that as possible.
Go back again to the whole process of time of dealing with the family, dealing with people at school, and coming out and all that. And obviously, culture has shifted some, methodology has shifted some. There's more support, more awareness, all that. But we're still, part of the reason that we even started this conversation was just about the fact that there is not the level of equality, to use the word, for everybody. I mean, we're talking about that in terms of Black Lives Matter right now in our society, but you actually mentioned that in regards to something going on in our school district back home, regarding people who are in the LGBTQ community, and that's what initiated this conversation for us a couple of days ago to begin with. So, what has changed? What doesn't seem like it's changing at all, and what can be done, again, for somebody, speaking to somebody who doesn't have the background, doesn't have the experience, right? And again, I'm a pastor, I've dealt with a lot of people, but talking to anybody who's watching, that maybe they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Like, I don't hate you, but I don't know what to do with you. What's the next step? What's improved? What needs to improve, and what's the next step?
What's improved on a national scale? That's really kind of hard to say. I again, back to the whole Matthew Shepard thing, that was extremely traumatic to watch. I'm glad that hate crimes against gay people is now a huge offense. It's like, you can be imprisoned for that. That's huge. The fact that we even recently had a Supreme Court decision that you cannot fire somebody for being gay. Mm-hmm. It's 2020. Why is this a thing? It shouldn't be a thing at all. Like,
again, as a pastor, I'm in a community where there's actually been a lot of outcry about that. Not like specifically where I am in Kentucky so much, but in certain sects of Christianity.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this is, and I definitely have my own views based on what I understand of the Bible, of sin in general, life in general, decisions in general, all of that. But when I set that aside, I look at it as, you have religion and you have humanity.
Right.
And there are places where those two things intersect, can intersect, should intersect in our lives, if you're doing it that way. But the humane side, like, I don't understand why this is a problem. The Supreme Court, I heard about this decision and I thought, why is this even an issue that we need to talk about? Why should we fire somebody? If you do a bad job, you should be fired.
I completely agree.
If you suck and you make everybody miserable, you should be fired. But if you have a certain religious belief, if you have a certain personality, if you are gay or trans or whatever, what does that have to do with somebody's ability to do a job?
Thank you. And that even goes to the military. Like, why are you trying to remove military restrictions for people who fall into this community? If you have somebody who's willing to die for your country, like, who cares who they're going home to at night? Who cares what they identify as? They're willing to lay their life down to protect the citizens of your country, and you want to completely strip those rights away from them. It is frustrating and completely infuriating. And so that's really hard. That is hard. Back to the whole Muhammad situation, it was difficult for me in that I'm so sorry. My girlfriend just got home and the dogs are excited. So back to Muhammad, it was really hard because, being gay was not really allowed. And I became involved with a theater troupe within Champaign. And there was a girl that I had met who was a few years younger than us, who also went to Muhammad. And she tried to start a GSA, a Gay Straight Alliance. And Muhammad met her with, no, but you can start a multicultural club. And so I have no idea what the situation currently is in Muhammad. I know that you and I are both on a group that's private, that's talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the changes that need to happen. Mm-hmm. It sounds like they still have improvements that need to be made. And it sounds like even nationally with our country, there are still tons of improvements that need to be made just for basic human rights. Mm-hmm. But when it goes down to an individual level, one of the things that you had asked, I don't speak for all gay people. I have my own gay experience. Everyone has their own gay experience. I know that the highest suicide rate amongst teenagers is within the LGBT community. Mm-hmm. They have one of the highest homeless rates. So it's hard, if you ever meet anybody who is a part of that community, I would strongly encourage just listen. Try to hear their story, be understanding. They don't have a problem that needs to be fixed because of their sexuality. They might have other problems when it comes to finding a home that's safe and secure, finding a friend who is willing to offer unconditional love. Not conditional, unconditional love. And that can do a world of wonders, just like somebody who's willing to sit on a porch with somebody 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. You don't know what the conversation is about, but you'll remember somebody who was that compassionate and willing to listen.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think it doesn't matter what your background is, what your religious belief is, what your political affiliation is, any of that. Everybody can do that if we get past the need to push our own individual viewpoints and agendas. And that's one of the things, I love the media and the technology that's available to us, like being able to do this on Zoom. I love social media and being able to interact with people. But it's become so hostile in that everybody wants to shout their opinions and their viewpoints. And a lot of times there's a lack of information, there's a lack of understanding. And again, there's just not listening. Like, as a pastor, what I find a lot of times is that when people are hurting, they lash out or they do things that are destructive.
Yeah.
Right. And what you just said about the suicide rate and the homeless rate within the gay community makes me think about that, because again, we still have this cultural kind of thing ingrained that, okay, this is more acceptable, but it's still not normal, right? Mm-hmm. And so, when you're a kid, 10, 15, whatever it is, and you're looking at acceptance as a huge thing, approval is a huge thing, people liking you is a huge thing, and now you're weird. That's hard.
Yeah,
that's hard. And again, when you began to finally reach out to people on any level, you talked about that table situation at lunch. What happened next, I guess, is one question. But then, like, how do you, when you're reaching out for just trying to feel this out, I'm trying to figure things out in my life and figure out who's safe, who's not safe, all of that. how can people respond? I mean, I know you're saying just listen and be there, but if that's not how I believe, if that's not where I am, if that's not who I am yet, whatever it might be, how can I be safe but still be me? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I really think it depends on who you approach. It does. Figure out somebody who's willing to have an open conversation. I have always appreciated somebody who upfront told me, I don't really have the same beliefs, but can I ask you a few questions? Absolutely. I'm not here to argue with anyone. I completely respect you have your beliefs and I have my own. I would love an open dialogue, but I also know a lot of people on both sides of that fence are not really ready to have that conversation, and they will meet that with a confrontation, and that's not going to help anybody at all. um, Communication really is key to any kind of relationship, from a general meeting to your most loved people in your family. You just have to be willing to say, I'm curious. I don't really understand fully,
Mhm.
but I have questions. Can I ask you? And it may get uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the best ways to approach any kind of situation. Not everything in life is going to be comfortable. The most important conversations are never comfortable, but
Right,
they're conversations that need to be had.
right, absolutely. Um, Speaking of those conversations, again, you don't have to get too personal, however you want to, but like you talked about the situation with your mom. What happened when you got home? Like how did that unfold? And maybe it's still unfolding by your reaction. But again, I'm thinking about somebody who maybe they're watching and they're saying, I need to have that conversation. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah. So with my mother, I will preface this by saying I absolutely love and respect her. I have no animosity towards her whatsoever. She's a very strong woman. However, she handled my coming out the worst way possible. Um, and she's one of those people. She's like me. Like, she wants to immediately take care of all the problems. And I completely understand. Like, I'm very aware of why she did what she did, but it was the wrong thing to do. And so again, we're in a village. Muhammad, like, being gay is like having a giant, not even kick me sign. It's a like set me on fire and throw things at my face sign. And so I told her I was gay. I went to school and I came home, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Don't worry. I called everyone in the family and I told them that you're gay." And I love her. I love her dearly. And I appreciate what she was trying to do, but that was not her responsibility. That
Mhm.
was not even in her realm of world to do. That was for me. It is
Mhm.
my story, my personal information to share with anybody. And so I would say, number one, if somebody ever comes out to you, please do not share that information. And I know that I'm really lucky in that my family's very open and accepting for the most part. But again, back to like the homeless rate and the suicide rate, most families are not. You don't know if you're going to end up, sharing some information that is that private, who's going to end up putting that child in harm or putting that person in harm. You don't know.
Mhm.
And it took a while for me to even be okay in speaking with my mom. And she and I actually had a lot of years where we butted heads because, and I think it comes back to what I said earlier. It's about communication and wanting to listen. Like, the most important part of communicating is listening and understanding, and then asking questions to understand better, and then, following up with anything else that you need to. And with my mom, she's very much this person of, there's a problem. I know that there was a solution I tried once. I'm just going to like slap that on, and we're going to assume that's going to work for everything. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. And so, I myself was homeless for a short period of time. And it
Mhm.
was because my mom was trying to immediately solve an issue when I was already struggling with a lot of other things. And it's just, I cannot stress how important it is for anybody to just first listen, ask questions if you don't understand, or even if you think you do understand, like reiterate it in a way of like, so what I think you're saying is X, Y, and Z. Please let me know if that's wrong. But like, just follow up, because, you know, if you have somebody who's different than you can't just immediately assume that what you're hearing right off the bat is correct. Right. You might end up being completely offensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. From there, you know, you mentioned that for a while you were homeless yourself, and going through that. I mean, what decisions do you have to make? Like, does it become survival mode at that point, self-preservation? I mean, what decisions did you have to make in that time to get through to the next stage of life, essentially?
So even that part of my life, it was really hard. I had graduated Parkland, barely. I went to school for cinema, barely. I was in a bad relationship. I had to call the police on my ex. I had to have them arrested and removed from the property. They broke into my apartment. Like, it was bad. And I mentally could not cope. Like, I did not have the necessary tools in my mental kit to be able to handle the stresses that I was facing, which I'm completely aware of. You know, like I had mentioned before, when I was 10, I was put on antidepressant medication, but I was never taught tools of how to express myself, how to stand up for myself, how to manage any kind of stress that was coming my way. And so I dropped out of school, and I was going through that rough patch with my ex. I had to get a restraining order, and I completely mentally broke. I did. I pulled the Britney Spears. I completely shaved my head. And while it was adorable, like, I knew that mentally, like, I just wanted a fresh start. And like, I had prepared myself that I wanted to talk to my mom and tell her I needed to figure out what to do. And I remember, like, she came home and she immediately grabbed me and wanted to know why I kept messing up. And it set me off. And I wanted to leave. I didn't want to have a conversation because I knew, like, she wanted to be confrontational. So I left in the middle of winter with a t-shirt, and for about 6 months I had wandered around and I tried to find friends whose couches I could sleep on. I tried to get back into school, and I was not mentally ready at all. I dropped out of school again, and it was hard. But being a 2-time school dropout, I knew that I wanted to personally persevere. And I'm almost glad that I did have those hardships, because by the time it was, I think within a year or two after all of that, I knew that I wanted to get a job at the University of Illinois because they could pay for me to get a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. So I took all the credit hours I had and I got a general studies degree. And then I knew I wanted to do better, that I could do better. One of the schools I dropped out of was the University of Illinois. And I knew the MBA would be hard. And I knew if I was going to work full-time and do the MBA full-time, that was going to be really hard. But if I could do it, I could do anything. Mm. So I applied, and I did it. And I was president of our class. And I really championed a lot of things. And the school ended up naming me as a Forte Fellow. And in order to be named as a Forte Fellow for any school, you have to be a woman in business who has shown strong leadership. And not many people are named that at all. And for me to be a professional MBA student was almost unheard of, to even receive that. I had received the Caught Being Online Award. I was the very first professional MBA student to ever get that award. It's usually given to students who just do the MBA program. But that award is something where you're nominated by your peers because you're going above and beyond. So I did, like, I completely put everything in where I saw my failures. I pushed forward and I tried to conquer as much as I could, and really tried to make sure that anybody else that I saw in my class who was struggling, that I would provide them all the resources I possibly could. I was constantly meeting with the dean of students. I was constantly meeting with the director and the head of the program, trying to figure out how I can help everyone else to make sure that everyone was succeeding. And to me, it's about helping everyone else around you to push forward and meet your goals. And as long as I can sit there and look back at where I felt like I was a personal failure. Again, two-time school dropout. But if I was able to take on a leadership role and make sure that those around me had every single opportunity available, introduce new programs, set up new schedules and businesses that had opportunities for the students, and brought in more people to engage with their own community, and even reach out to a couple of other local businesses here and really get the business students involved with them. At the time, I'd worked at the College of Engineering, like I still work there now, but really get the scientists and other people that I had worked with who were highly intelligent, just trying to get them engaged and interacting with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was able to have an impact on all these different multiple communities that I was a part of, and push that out and just make something of the world around me and make it better.
It sounds like one of the things that is quite a trait for you is the focus on pushing forward no matter what.
Yeah.
And of course, that's not how everybody responds. To opposition to adversity. And again, that's why the suicide rate is what it is. That's why the homeless rate is what it is. The mental health issues that go along with being just who you are in the gay community can be a lot higher. So talk about the emotional side of it. Like, you push through and you focus on these other things, and okay, I'm gonna make beauty from ashes, so to speak. But there still is the emotional toll, right?
Yeah.
How did you deal with it? Obviously, here's the result. How did you deal with it?
I didn't at all. I did not deal with it well at all. I was in the pavilion. I had a bunch of mental breakdowns. I was heavily medicated for a long time. I went through my crazy periods, and it wasn't honestly until I found a really good therapist who meshed well with me, who challenged me. Like, I had to find a therapist who wouldn't sit there and be like, you know what, you had a really hard life. I feel really bad for you. I don't need to hear that. I need to hear, like, that sucks, suck it up. What do you want to do? Like, how are you going to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
That I was personally challenged. And this was within the last 5 years. And it wasn't until I found somebody who helped me mentally to push forward through a lot of those barriers that I could move forward.
And so that's a key to me, which again takes me back to the pastoral side of it, of you can have both in a situation, right? You can have this is wrong and this sucks.
Yeah.
And that can be true. But it can also be true of, you can let yourself be a victim,
right,
or you can do something about it.
Right.
Right. And again, I don't want to undermine or minimize the horrible experiences, the horrible reactions that people have sometimes when somebody comes out, when somebody is struggling with just stepping into their life, because it is wrong when you get fired for a job,
right.
all those sorts of things, or when a parent, when you tell your mom in the morning you're gay and you come home and your stuff's outside.
Yeah.
I've heard that story from people that have gone to churches that I've been in the past, and I look at those situations, and I'm like, I have 4 kids, they're all young, but I can never imagine a situation, I mean, short of them actually murdering somebody, where I would look at them and say, you no longer belong in this house.
Right.
I just can't do it. Now that's me, but you can have both sides. And that's one of the things I think it's lost in the conversation sometimes is, we need the understanding, we need to progress, but there is an element of this is still your life. You
Yeah,
still do have the responsibility to make it what you want it to be,
right.
no matter how anybody responds, right? I mean, do you believe that, or
No, I completely agree. And again, like I will go back to my friend who recently told me that I'm an aggressive peer pressurer. And a lot of that has to do with a therapist that I had met a couple of years ago. Like that was a huge turning point for me. You can have somebody who can listen to you all day long, and it is extremely crucial and important. But that's up to you to figure out what kind of relationship do you want with this person? Like, do you want to figure out how you can help them push beyond whatever problems they're having? Or do you just want to listen? But again, like even that situation is really up to the person, because anytime you meet with a friend who's frustrated or upset, you don't know if they just want to vent. Are they looking for a solution? You don't know.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to step back. You were talking about failures. I want to address the biggest failure in your life, which is when you left the University of Illinois
Oh,
and
yeah.
you went to some other place. What happened there? I'm just joking.
I actually went back to the U of I and I got my MBA. I conquered it. It was beautiful.
Oh, goodness. So, really, though, on a serious note, as we kind of wrap up, what questions am I not asking in this conversation that you would say these are questions that need to be asked in this moment? For, again, people who don't have any background in dealing with people who are gay or lesbian or trans or bi or whatever it is, who are looking at the media that's out there, who are listening to the rhetoric that's out there, and they're struggling with okay, what's the human side of this? But I also have this in me, whether it's because of the way I've been taught or grew up or whatever, that I feel like I need to fight for whatever you want to call it, purity, righteousness, whatever. But we realize, we're talking about people.
Right.
Right? We're talking about people. What questions do, let's just say, the Christians, right? The people who the parents who are saying, I don't know what I do if my kid comes out, whatever it might be, what questions do we need to ask? What things do we need to know that we don't know?
That is such a loaded question. Um, when it comes to the religious perspective, again, I just have to say Jesus never said anything about homosexuals in the Bible. He didn't. He loved those as much as you possibly can. Like he had a really close relationship with Lazarus. He loved Mary Magdalene. He took in everybody. And if you're trying to live a life like Christ, stop worrying. Just be helpful. Try to be a friend. And for the parents who sit there and say, I don't know what I would do if my kid was gay, like, why be a parent? There's so many other issues that could possibly handle or like come up. But, as a parent, you can still handle it. That is such a small part of who somebody is. You know, Whoever you're married to or have fallen in love with, just think of it as your own child. They might find somebody else that makes them a better person or makes them strive to be a better person or want to do things and be happy. Why wouldn't you want your child to be happy? I don't know. And for the people who approach somebody who's gay and you don't know what to do, I would say, first of all, try to be a friend.
Mhm.
Listen to what they have to say before you ask questions. Try to figure out what your own questions are. If you have somebody who sits there, you have your friend Joe and he thinks Bob is cute. It's weird, okay, but like, why do you think Bob is cute? Like, what does he do? Like, is he a good person? Does he help out in the community? Like, try to understand beyond what is a basic face value that you're uncomfortable with. Like, push your own limits in what you're uncomfortable with. People do not grow unless you try to push through those and be uncomfortable. And it's like what I said earlier, you cannot have an actual relationship without having uncomfortable conversations. They just need to be had. And a lot of people are more comfortable than others in openly discussing what their history is and what's going on. You know, figure out if they're willing to be that open with you. Who will want to talk to you? Don't enter into a conversation and want to be confrontational. Don't enter into a conversation immediately assuming this person is right or wrong. Just come with questions. Come with an open mind, an open heart. If your mind is changed at the end of the day, that's fine. If it's not changed, that's also fine. Everyone has different viewpoints, different perspectives, different opinions. That's fine. Be uncomfortable.
But in that, and again, this whole series is about what people believe, and my goal is to talk to as many people as possible in as many different areas as possible. But what you just said is so key. People can have different perspectives, they can have different viewpoints, they can have different opinions. There's nothing wrong with that,
right,
until you do one of two things. Either you discount the value of other people's beliefs and perspectives and opinions, or number two, you unwillingly force yours on other people.
right.
And again, that's a great tragedy in religion that I think turns a lot of people off, in politics, in life. When there's not understanding, again, people don't want to talk. People don't want to listen. They
Right.
want to yell. They want to push, and I think that is what's hurting us in this moment, in so many areas, of really being able to go forward and build the bridges and build the relationships, right?
Yeah.
So for I hate the idea of an us versus them. Like, there's the gay community, there's the non-gay community, but that is a reality to a degree, right? But in your community, my community, just to use this simplistic phraseology right now, what can we do now to build that bridge so that tomorrow, so that 10 years from now, a 10-year-old kid isn't experiencing what you experienced 20-25 years ago? A 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, however, 15-year-old, I don't know how old you were, isn't having a conversation with their mom and everything freezes, and they don't know when they go to school whether they're going to have a house to come back to, whether they're going to have a family that wants them around, whether everybody's going to act like nothing has even happened, or whether they're going to walk in the door and hear, "Hey, I let everybody know for you." Um,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things, we talked about the Supreme Court decision recently. What are some things that you think need to happen in the community, in the culture, in the country, to build those bridges going forward?
Honestly, I would say if you see something from an outsider perspective, speak up. Really is one of the biggest things that you could ever do for somebody. It doesn't even matter if you bring in the gay thing into it. If you had somebody who said, my mother told something very personal to me, to the entire family, regardless of sexuality, you'd be like, that's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And so remove the sexuality out of it. If
Mm-hmm.
you see somebody who's not being treated right, be a friend. Support them, speak up against anything is really the number one start that you could do. Long term, it's going to be hard. We're just starting to get rights from a Supreme Court. So we still have a lot to do moving forward. Hopefully one day I would like to move beyond and just be seen as somebody who's a neighbor and a friend. And I don't need somebody to label me by my sexuality. That's all I want. At the end of the day, hopefully sooner rather than later. But to get there, I can't even begin to imagine what other steps we could do. I wish I had something more
No, that's
inspiring or anything else. But myself, I want to be seen like everybody else. I'm just a person.
final question I have, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit with
Okay.
this. You mentioned at the very beginning, you said something to the effect of, I don't know who I am really. How does anybody in your shoes who's trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world, how do you find out who you are? Do you
That's
know?
hard. That's really hard. That's really hard. I like to think that people in general go through their own metamorphosis every 5 years or so. You are the people that you hang out with. You are the things that you allow to influence your life. One of the things that I will never forget from one of the retreats that I went on with my mother was the most important things in your life are the things that you give your time, your money, and your attention to. And so if you sit back and honestly look at how you spend your day, are you spending it on social media? Are you spending it helping others? Are you spending it volunteering within your community? Are you spending it, playing video games? Whatever it is, like those are the things that you hold most important in your life. And I think that was a really critical moment for me in my life to sit and say, I'm not spending enough time focusing on how I can make myself a better person.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first question. So if I'm not a good person or good enough, what do I think is a good enough person, and how do I get to that?
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's, listening to Malcolm Gladwell, trying to find other New York Times bestsellers, figuring out who has cracked their own codes and figuring out organizational, Marie Kondo, if I need to sit there and like fold my underwear to make me a better person at the end of the, sure, why not? Like I'll try it for a week. That's fine. But it's a lot of making sure that you stop to reevaluate yourself. And I think always pushing yourself. Like I will never stop. I don't ever want to sit there and stay and say, this is good enough. I still want to do better. I still want to learn. I still want to encourage others. I still want to meet people. I want to know their stories too. So I will always try to figure that out. But who am I as a person? I don't know. I can say that I'm a very good friend. I'm a very good girlfriend. I'm very romantic. I'm a really good dog mom. But I never want to stop growing.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, it sounds like the program is, what do you believe? It sounds like what you believe is that we need to keep growing.
Yeah.
Individually, as a society, in individual families and communities, we need to keep growing.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great thing to believe. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Good to
Devin.
see your face.
Well, good to see you. I enjoy our conversations.
This was very good, and hopefully not too hard on you.
No, it wasn't painful at all. It was pretty good.
That's never my goal with these, is to make people uncomfortable. But again, if you're going to talk about things that you're passionate about, and especially when we're doing it for the standpoint of trying to bring understanding, there is an uncomfortableness sometimes to it. That's part of the growth process. But that's why I'm doing this. That's what the whole thing is about. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. And thank you so much. And everybody that is watching, thank you for tuning in, and join us again very soon.